Her wrists were bound with a rope that had once tied cattle. It scratched against skin that had forgotten softness. She stood barefoot in the mud, her dress stiff from old blood and wood ash, the hem heavy with morning frost. Beside her, a pig squealed. Its back was slick with dew. Its feet kicked up straw as it strained against the rope, desperate to flee. She did not move, not even when a man grabbed the pig's ear and yanked it hard enough to make it shriek. The voices around her rose with laughter. Boots stomped in the sludge. Coins changed hands. A boy asked if the pig came with the woman, and someone answered that only one of them had any value. Her husband stood on a crate. He lifted a jug and his voice. His teeth were stained, his eyes drunk before noon. 3 shillings and a pint, he said. 2 and a sack of barley, someone replied. No one turned to look at her face. No one asked if she wanted to be there. No one asked anything at all. She looked straight ahead. Beyond the stalls, past the steaming entrails and the rows of gutted rabbits. Her gaze did not flinch when a stranger lifted a lock of her hair between 2 fingers and sniffed. The laughter behind him was louder this time. The law was not there, but it did not need to be, because the law had already spoken. It had said nothing, and silence, in this place, was permission. They did not write down her name. They wrote only what she cost. A wife, a pig. One was sold, the other was weighed. The crowd dispersed before noon. The mud washed clean with the next rain. But in the margin of an old registry, someone scribbled the record, Lot 17. Wife. No objections. History kept the number and forgot the woman. They never asked where she was born, not even when the clerk needed a name for the sale. He wrote down only what mattered: able-bodied, no dependents, no known disease. But there was a street, narrow, damp, buried behind the brickyard, and a room with 1 mattress where 5 people slept. Her first memory might have been a cracked pot catching rainwater from the ceiling, or the sound of her father's belt scraping against the chair before he stood up. No one ever taught her to read, but she learned to stir porridge without letting it stick. She learned to clean wounds and lie about their cause. She learned to smile at the preacher and not flinch when the back of his hand brushed her waist. She was promised to a man she had never spoken to. He was 30. She was 15. He arrived at the door with calloused hands and the smell of yeast. Her mother tied her hair with a ribbon that day, the last ribbon she would ever wear. At the altar, the priest looked more bored than solemn. Her husband did not kiss her. He pressed a coin into her father's palm and nodded. Marriage, for her, was not a union. It was a trade. One household exchanged for another. The chores changed rooms. The bruises changed hands. He worked at the mill when the mill was open. He drank when it was not. Sometimes he came home laughing, his mouth full of borrowed stories. Other times, he came home silent. Those were the nights she kept a candle burning, not to see, but to be seen. So he would remember she was there before the bottle reached the table. He never said he hated her. He simply said she cost too much. She spoke little, not because she had nothing to say, but because no one listened. Her voice shrank in corners and cupboards until it lived only in the motion of her hands, scrubbing, folding, sewing, hiding bread for a neighbor's child who had not eaten in 2 days. The same child once asked if she had a name. She only smiled and touched his cheek. There was a market for everything in that town, a price for every silence. Men traded horses, women traded recipes, and sometimes, when a man grew tired of the woman he married, he traded her too. Not with anger, not with cruelty, but with the tired logic of a man who saw nothing strange in offering what he owned. When he first spoke of the idea, she was peeling turnips. He stood at the doorway, not meeting her eye. "There's a way out," he said. "We've no money for courts, but the lads at the tavern said I could try the market." She did not ask what kind of market. She already knew. She did not cry. She wiped her hands and set the knife down. The next morning, a neighbor woman came by. She carried rope in one hand and a scarf in the other. They said nothing to each other. The neighbor took the rope and tested its length, then offered the scarf. The woman who would be sold tied her hair back slowly, her hands steady. Outside, the air smelled of livestock and old ale. The crowd was already forming, and she walked into it. They did not dress her for shame. They dressed her for clarity. The apron was removed, the sleeves rolled, her feet bare to match the pigs. The market was not a stage, but it had its customs. Buyers needed to see the goods, and so she stood, not out of defiance, not out of dignity, but because sitting was not permitted. The man who brought her there had already begun shouting numbers. He waved a scrap of paper as if it proved something more than desperation. The neighbors did not look surprised. A few even greeted her as they passed. One offered a nod, the same way she had once nodded to a loaf of bread cooling on another's windowsill. Civility, in its strangest form, still had its place. No one asked if she agreed. The sale was not illegal, it simply was. And when something becomes normal, it no longer needs permission. In some villages, they used to pour ale on the woman's head after the exchange, a mock baptism, to wash away the husband's claim. Others placed a halter around her shoulders, leading her like cattle from one man to another. In this town, they kept it simple: a nod, a coin, a silence. Children watched from fences. Women passed by without comment. The constable was not far, but he had business at the pub. Someone offered 2 shillings and a pair of hens. Another raised the bid with a barrel of salted fish. No one laughed anymore, not because they were ashamed, but because the game had become real. The man selling her scratched his chin. He called for more. She remained still. The pig beside her snorted. A rope tightened. A man stepped forward. 3 shillings and the pig, he said. The seller paused, then nodded. The woman did not look at the man who now owned her. She did not look at the man who had sold her. She stared instead at the ground, where a single thread had come loose from her skirt. Her hand reached for it, then stopped. The thread swayed with the wind. And then the crowd moved on. She was led away without ceremony. The pig stayed behind. The law never arrived. It had no need to. By afternoon, her name was gone. What remained was a receipt. It began not with violence, but with boredom. He no longer shouted when she forgot the salt. He no longer raised his hand when the fire died too soon. He stopped speaking altogether, except to curse the wind or mutter about debts. She heard him at night, whispering in the dark. Not prayers, numbers, names. He was talking to someone, or perhaps only to himself. His fingers tapped the table in patterns that made no sense. Sometimes he laughed, a low sound, like the last breath of a dying animal. One morning, she found his boots muddy and his coat gone. In its place was a bundle of straw soaked in ale. He came home that night with swollen knuckles and a bruise beneath his eye. When she brought him water, he looked at her for the first time in weeks. "They said I could do it," he said. "It's not uncommon." She said nothing. He took that as agreement. The next day, he visited the market. He did not ask where to stand. He did not ask how to list her. The butcher showed him. The grocer lent him a crate. There was no shame in the transaction, only the logistics. He practiced how he would call the bid. He stood in the yard and shouted into the fog. A neighbor heard and thought he was training a dog. The dog, if there had been one, never barked. She swept the floor as he counted coins. She boiled potatoes as he measured rope. She washed the hem of her dress as he wiped rust from a bell. The rituals of preparation moved around her, never through her. On the morning before the sale, he asked if she had anything to wear. She opened the drawer. There were 2 dresses, one with a tear near the sleeve, one with a stain near the hem. He pointed to the cleaner one. "Wear your hair down," he said. "Makes you look younger." That evening, she sat by the fire. The flames made her shadow tremble on the wall. Her fingers moved without thought, folding scraps of cloth into neat squares. She paused once, as if to speak, but the words dissolved before they reached her lips. Across the alley, a woman watched from her window. She had seen it once before. Different man, different wife, same silence. The woman came the next morning with the rope. No greeting, no hesitation. She placed the rope on the table and adjusted the woman's collar. She wiped the corner of her mouth with the edge of her own sleeve. Then she stepped back and nodded. It was time. The walk to the market was short, but they took the long way, through alleys that stank of fish oil and coal smoke, past children playing in puddles, past a preacher who did not look up from his book. Her husband walked ahead, the rope in his hand loose enough not to chafe. She followed without resistance. Not because she agreed, but because she had stopped disagreeing a long time ago. She wore no bonnet. The wind caught her hair and tossed it across her face. She did not brush it away. Her eyes stayed on the ground, counting the cracks in the cobblestone, as if each one were a prayer she had once said and forgotten. A boy ran past and pointed. His mother slapped his hand, but did not stop him from staring. At the edge of the square, a man waited with a pig. The pig's snout was wet. Its hooves scraped the wooden platform. It snorted as they approached. Her husband grinned, said it made the scene complete. They placed her beside the animal. The crowd was already gathering. Not large, just enough to make it feel like an event. Some leaned on carts. Others stood with hands in pockets. A few carried jugs, already half empty. The man beside her tugged the pig forward. Its rope caught on a nail and snapped. The animal squealed and twisted, but was pulled back into place. She did not flinch. The husband cleared his throat. He stepped onto the crate and raised one arm. His voice cracked on the first shout, then found its rhythm. "Here she is," he called, strong, quiet, knows her duties. There was laughter. Someone clapped. He listed her virtues the way a man might list the features of a plow. Wakes early, cooks well, No known illnesses. One man asked if she snored. Another asked if she still bled. A third held up a coin and said he was only buying if the pig came too. She stood through it all. The wind tugged at her dress. Her bare feet sank into the wood. Her hands hung at her sides. Fingers curled slightly, as if still holding something long gone. She did not speak. Not once, because silence was the last thing they could not take. The market did not pause for her. Chickens clucked behind cages. Hooves thudded against slats. A dog barked, then yelped when a boot caught its side. Above the square, smoke rose from chimneys into a sky the color of slate. The clouds promised rain, but the stalls remained open. She was not the only thing for sale. There were pigs, lambs, onions, fish packed in salt, belts made of old leather, and spoons carved from bone. Her presence barely raised an eyebrow. Yet people gathered, slowly, casually. Some leaned against barrels. Others stayed just close enough to hear. They were not there to protest. They were there to see if the rumors were true. A man approached her. His coat smelled of tobacco and vinegar. He said nothing, only circled once, slowly. Then he stepped close and lifted a lock of her hair between his fingers. He smelled it, as if checking for rot. Then he walked away without bidding. Another reached out and touched her chin. He turned her face to the light. She kept her eyes fixed on the empty space behind him. He chuckled, said she would do fine, and asked if she cooked meat without burning it. Someone else commented on her hands. Another asked if she had all her teeth. The questions became jokes. The jokes became wagers. The crowd grew louder. No one spoke to her. They spoke around her, through her, as if she were not a woman but a sack of grain. Her silence was convenient. It spared them discomfort. A young girl, perhaps 10, stared from behind her mother's skirts. The mother pulled her away. A constable passed by on horseback, his uniform crisp, his boots shining. He saw the platform. He saw the rope. He saw the woman. He saw the crowd. And he kept riding. No laws were broken that day, only the woman. The bidding resumed. A man with red cheeks offered a goose and a silver ring. Another shouted 5 shillings and a sack of potatoes. Her husband laughed, asked for 7 and the pig. The pig snorted again. Its tail flicked at flies. Behind them, a preacher stood in the shadow of the chapel. He said nothing. His hands were folded. His eyes were closed. And still she stood. 2 hours passed. The crowd began to thin. Some had already seen enough. They went home to their wives and their soups, leaving behind only footprints and unfinished sentences. In the end, it was not the highest bid that won. It was the firmest voice. "I'll take her." Someone said, "No haggling, no embellishment. Just a decision." He stepped forward with mud on his boots and a pipe clenched between his teeth. His coat was patched at the elbows, his hands thick with old scars. He did not smile. He did not blink. He simply pointed and said her. There was a pause in the square, not of protest, not of conscience, but of completion. The kind of silence that falls when a deal is struck and there is nothing left to say. The husband stepped down from the crate. He wiped his palms on his trousers and reached for the man's coin. Their hands met, calloused and dry. No witnesses were required. The crowd itself was enough. She did not look at them. The man who bought her tied the rope again. Not roughly, not gently, just efficiently. He gave it a short tug, and she began to walk. Behind them, the pig squealed once more, now alone on the platform. No one applauded, no one spoke her name. A boy called out that the pig should have gone with her. Laughter followed, sharp and ugly. Then someone spat on the ground, and another whistled for his dog. The market began to fold in on itself, meat wrapped, carts loaded, baskets lifted back onto shoulders. Life resumed. The preacher opened his eyes and turned toward the chapel. The constable disappeared behind a corner. A woman selling onions whispered that she remembered the same thing happening 10 years ago. Only then the wife had wept and tried to run. This one, she said, didn't even flinch. The platform was scrubbed later that day. The pig was sold by evening. The rope was used again the following week for a sack of wheat. No record was made of the transaction. There was no signature, no parchment, only a mark beside a name in a butcher's ledger. It read, "Purchase completed. Wife and pig separated. Both satisfactory." What lingered was not the sale itself. It was the image. A woman standing beside livestock. No resistance, no farewell, just a rope and a road. He lived at the edge of town, where the hedges grew wild and the roofs sagged under moss. His house was not large, but it was dry, and the door latched without protest. No one visited. The windows remained closed even on warm days. He did not speak more than necessary, and the townspeople preferred it that way. He had been widowed, though no one recalled when. Some said his wife drowned in a pond. Others said she left him, and he buried the story. Either way, the cottage stood quiet for years. Then one day, smoke returned to the chimney. She arrived without bags, without voice, only the clothes on her back and the rope that still left an imprint around her wrists. He did not offer her a room. He pointed to a corner where a thin mattress lay on wooden boards. She sat. That was all. The neighbors noticed her presence only because the windows lit up again. At the well, someone asked if the man had remarried. No one answered. The question faded like the steam from his chimney, present for a moment, then gone. She fetched water before sunrise, chopped roots, mended his shirts, scrubbed the floor until her knuckles bled. Not from command, simply because work filled the hours better than thought. In the market, she walked a step behind him, carried what he bought, returned home without ever speaking to another soul. She was never struck, never shouted at, but she was not spoken to either. Days passed without her name being said. If she had one, he never used it. He called her woman, sometimes nothing at all. In the second month, she cut her hair. No one asked why. In the third, she stopped eating meat. He did not notice. By the fourth, she no longer looked people in the eye. Her head remained bowed even when alone. The habit had settled into her bones. The children in town called her the ghost wife. Not because she was pale, not because she wore gray, but because she moved through the streets like someone already gone, a presence without weight. Only one woman spoke to her, a seamstress. She offered an old scarf one morning. The woman took it, nodded once, and never wore it. She never raised her voice, never knocked on a door, never asked for anything. And no one asked for her. There was a Sunday when it rained without stopping. Gutters overflowed. Dirt paths turned to rivers. The bell at the chapel rang late, its rope swollen with moisture. She did not attend the service. She never did. But she stood at the edge of the road, watching as others passed in their finest clothes, their shoes wrapped in cloth to fight the mud. She watched without blinking. The water soaked her to the skin, but she did not move. Her hair stuck to her cheeks. Her hands remained clasped in front of her stomach. A boy stared too long and was pulled away by his mother. The boy whispered later that the woman looked like she was waiting for someone to drag her away. But no one ever did. She returned to the cottage before noon, scrubbed the same floor, reheated the same broth, folded the same shirt that had never truly dried. Her days repeated like the ticking of a broken clock. No progress, no chime, only motion. The man she lived with ate in silence. Sometimes he muttered about the price of grain. Sometimes he cursed the sound of crows. He never asked her how she slept. He never noticed that her eyes remained open even in the dark. She did not close them anymore. Not fully. Not unless she was alone in the shed behind the cottage, where the light from the cracks in the wall could keep her tethered to something real. The only mark of her existence was the scent of soap on the linens. No handwriting, no letters, not even a sigh left in the dust. When she walked past others in the village, they would lower their voices, not out of cruelty, not out of fear, but out of something far worse: indifference. One girl said she once saw the woman brushing her hair at the river, said her hands trembled, but her face was calm, as if she were practicing how to disappear. By the time summer came, most had forgotten she lived there. The well water tasted the same, the roads remained unpaved, and the cottage stood, just as it always had, swallowing the silence it helped create. She had been bought, but what was taken had no name, and so it was never missed. It was winter again, the kind of winter that cracks wood and turns breath to glass. The cottage remained closed. Smoke rose thinly from the chimney. Frost curled along the window panes like veins searching for warmth. No one had seen her in 3 days. At first, it meant nothing. She was not the kind of woman people sought. If she was absent, it was assumed she was busy. If she was quiet, it was assumed she was tired. If she was gone, it was assumed she had left without a sound. He told the butcher that she had run away. He said it without urgency, as if reporting a missing scarf. The butcher shrugged and wrapped the meat in paper. The neighbors asked nothing. Their lives were crowded enough. Children to feed, boots to mend, chimneys to unclog. One woman paused at the edge of the property, wondering if she should knock. Then the wind rose and she turned back. In the shed behind the cottage, there was a smell. At first, it was faint, earthy, sour. It could have been rotting potatoes or mold. Then it thickened, settled into the walls, the kind of scent that clings to hair and clothes no matter how far you walk from it. He said it was a dead animal, a rat, maybe. He would clean it, eventually. No one offered to help. Winter pressed on. Snow covered the path to the back door. The footprints disappeared. The smell remained. By spring, the shed had collapsed on one side. Rain had loosened the roof. Weeds pushed through the foundation. The window shattered in a storm. Birds nested in the rafters. Inside, there was a blanket, a pair of shoes, a scarf folded neatly on a wooden beam. But no body. Only the absence. He stopped mentioning her. When asked, he said she had never belonged to him anyway. Just a woman passing through. No papers, no witness, no debt. In the town's registry, there was no entry under deaths. No parish bell had rung. No grave had been dug. That year, a clerk was assigned to revise the property records. A young man with neat handwriting and little patience. He went door to door with his ledger, ticking off names, asking questions, making lists of what belonged to whom. When he reached the cottage at the edge of town, the man greeted him with a nod. He walked him through the rooms, pointed to the tools, the livestock, the broken fence he meant to fix. The clerk asked if there were any other residents. The man shook his head. "Just me," he said. "Always has been." The clerk looked at the shed but said nothing. Later that evening, in the back room of the town hall, he flipped to a blank section and began to write. His pen scratched across the page like a whisper too faint to catch. Lot 27. One male occupant. No heirs. No servants. Previous female presence unverified. No burial registered. Structure noted shed unstable. Contents undetermined. Footnote former wife. Reportedly departed. See livestock log, page 12. No questions were raised. No signatures requested. The line sat quietly in the ledger, surrounded by measurements and ink. A week later, the record was filed. A month after that, the clerk was reassigned. The year passed. The ink faded. And with it, she vanished. Not from memory. There was no memory to erase. She vanished from paper, from law, from proof. What remained was a faint scent in the wood, a dent in the mattress, a name whispered once and never again. When spring fully came, children picked wildflowers near the shed. One girl asked why no one lived there. Her brother said it was haunted by a woman who never spoke. Their mother told them to hush and hurry along. No one ever looked under the floorboards. No one ever lit a candle for her. She had been sold, then buried by silence. And silence was all that was left. They still tell stories about the market. The stones remain, worn smooth by the souls of generations. Children play where livestock once stood. Lovers kiss where deals were struck. And beneath it all, the ground remembers. Not in names or dates, but in weight, in echo, in the quiet pulse of something never buried properly. A few streets away, there's a ledger behind glass. It lists prices for barley and soap. It records a cow sold with cracked hooves. It lists a pig, healthy. And beside it, faint ink, barely legible now, the line that matters most. Lot 27, former wife, sold with livestock. No one knows who wrote it. The handwriting is crooked. The ink has bled. But the cruelty remains sharp. The pig was likely counted, registered, slaughtered. Its bones boiled down and its hide stretched. Its presence, however short, was measured. The woman was not. She left no child, no grave, no story told aloud. Only a silence that stretched over a field of years and settled like dust in the corners of memory. There are no monuments for her, no plaque on the square, no sermon ever spoken in her name. But sometimes, when the market is empty, and the sun is low, and the wind moves without a sound, something lingers, a sense that someone once stood there, not beside a man, not beneath a god, not before a jury, but beside a pig, and no one spoke for her. History prefers its heroines crowned or burned, but she had no fire, she had no fight, only stillness, only rope, only the quiet act of not running when she had nowhere left to go. This story was not written to redeem her. It was written so we could no longer pretend she never existed. And if something in you recoils, if your breath caught somewhere between her silence and the sound of coins falling on wet wood, then let that be her voice now. Share it. Speak it. Because her name was erased, but her absence still stains the stone. And if you believe stories like hers deserve more than footnotes and ledger ink, subscribe, not for her, for the next one. Because the throne never forgets, but it waits to see who will